And I'm very thankful to Advocate Jayan Bhatt who agreed to be our panelist for today's session. Just a brief introduction for Advocate Bhatt. Ms. Advocate Jayan Bhatt is an independent legal practitioner who is an alumni of National University of Singapore as well as the New York University, USA. And he completed his master's from both the universities. He has also worked in a prestigious law firm, Clyde and Company LLP in Dubai for 2 years. And after that, he moved to India. And here he is a senior panel counsel for the government of India and also in the Honorable High Court of Delhi. He also practices in the Supreme Court of India. And he has a keen interest in mentoring young minds and has been a prolific speaker at various platforms. And we are very happy to have him connected with us today, and he's going to talk on a very interesting and a very leading topic, that is digitalization of courts and the problems or the several loopholes that might occur and how to tackle them. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sanya ji and Madhura ji, for having me, and Indian Law Association's new chapter, Sonipat. Um, before I start, I always urge my audience, because we are a very limited gathering, to have your cameras on in case broadband is not a problem. That way, it also helps me to interact better with my target audience, and I know that they are in tune, with the topic. At the end of the day, this is something which has been organized by LA for all our benefit, and I think the beneficiaries should always participate. The other request I put forth before my webinars is, please feel free to interject me at any point in time. We can try to make the session as interactive as possible. I'm sure some of you may be law students, some of you may be lawyers, but may be facing the problem in the pandemic caused because of the virtual court hearings in various parts of the country. Having said that, I think it's a very important topic that Ms. Kishwar has chosen for the day, which is the digitization of our courts and the challenges ahead. Only this morning, I think I was reading the newspaper. I don't know which one was it, one of the leading national newspapers, which said the Supreme Court came down heavily on one of the public interest litigations just about yesterday, which said that we cannot make the courts all virtual, and it may not be strictly violative of fundamental rights or Article 21 or 14, so as to say, because the courts still need to work physically, and people are used to the brick and mortar model of our court system. Not all the courts are digitized, the broadband hasn't reached everywhere, and that is obviously a physical problem. However, I think without cause, this PL was dismissed. Now, this is one leg of the argument. The other leg of the argument is, when the pandemic started, when the lockdown started last year in the country in March of 2019, Supreme Court, I think, was the first court to embrace virtual court hearings, which was tried to be adopted by multiple high courts in the country and some trial courts. But as we have seen, and my interaction with lawyers from across the country, my associates, my interns, my fellow colleagues in different states and towns have obviously portrayed a very dismal picture of how virtual hearings uh, have been versus what they could have been in these 2 years. We still have a very, very long way ahead of us in terms of how we can embrace digitization, how we can make courts a little more user friendly, considering that every big multinational corporation that we have heard of people working from home, have embraced technology and the usage of the technology in terms of making things more productive, faster, and time sensitive. On the contrary, courts have obviously grappled with the appropriate use of digitization, how to conduct trials, how to do cross examination, how to conclude different arguments, how to share documents. All those things, I think, have come as a problem on a day to day basis, both from the side of the practitioner and also from the side of the judges and their staff, or the registry, which basically mans the system of the court day to day's affair. Having said that, I think it's also a problematic issue that in 2 years' time, the whole concept of digital India or digital Bharat has not taken off the wings that it was supposed to, and the dream still remains a distant dream. And I do not know, personally speaking, as to how much of digitization or virtual court hearings in the future we are going to embrace as a country. As a practicing lawyer, there have been both pluses and minuses of being involved in virtual court hearings. Let me count the advantages first, and then we'll go to the negatives. I think the few pluses that I have personally realized is definitely a great saving of time. that was initially getting wasted in commute, waiting for the judges to come and sit on time in courts, or if sometimes the judges would be on leave, then that information would be relayed later to the practicing lawyers, finding your parking spot, going from one court to the other. All those things I think have been beautifully taken care of by the limited functionality of our courts in terms of virtual court hearing. And that today enables lawyers like me to hop on from one forum to the other with the ease of a button. So, for example, there have been days where my office has been engaged in multiple court hearings, and I've been able to finish one court hearing with the click of a button. Even if the matter got passed over, I had the luxury of my laptop and the convenience of my home to again click at the other link and then present myself before the other court and argue. Having said that, there are equal number of negatives because though the convenience of button at my home and the connectivity of Wi-Fi has been of a great help, but this connectivity does not translate into the same or equal bandwidth that the court has to have, because the court as an institution and the judges as the stakeholder of those institution have been grappling with power issues, Wi-Fi issues. They have not been able to train their staff to take enough queries or a turnaround time for those queries between the staff and the lawyers, which have caused innumerable amount of confusion and chaos in the months which have preceded us in this pandemic. Now the problem practical side is, for example, if just like yesterday I had two matters, one in the High Court and one in the trial court. My High Court matter got over in the morning, and my trial court matter was at 2 p.m. I had to wait on Cisco WebEx for about 45 minutes before the reader or the court staff responded to my colleague's call from my office and said that the Judge Saab has already issued notice and the date has been given in January. Now imagine those 45 minutes of precious time in a band, in a court, waiting just for a courtesy hearing to take place. That also doesn't take place. The appearance of my colleague goes for, and my appearance is not marked. And that has also happened in a lot of other hearings where lawyers like me have suffered because our appearances are not marked, giving not a very rosy picture to the clients who we represent, because in their mind the apprehension is that despite charging for the professional fees, our lawyer has not turned up in the court on a particular given day. Now that is a practical problem. How can we cope up with this problem? I think for a year and a half, many times when I interact with my lawyer colleagues and my young interns who come to my office, even virtually, I say in a lighter vein that perhaps I may have forgotten the art of trial advocacy in this year and a half because no trial have happened in the country. And that, my friends, is a very, very grim picture because the foothold of any good institution or even a great institution is how a case commences, and if that sees the light of the day, and eventually, if justice is given after a proper and a fair trial, is adjudicated. That unfortunately has not happened in India for the past 2 years. We do not know if we are going to have a third wave or not. We are obviously anticipating it, but keeping our finger crossed that it should not happen. Considering 2022 is right next door, we are hoping that the court achieve normalcy, things get back to normal. But there are a few suggestions and solutions that I would like to keep on this platform for all the young listeners here. One is that we must adopt the hybrid model. I think that is the need of the day. Because things like judge's holiday, Passover, adjournments, not finding parking space, etc., can be really taken care of by the first 1 or 1.5 hour of morning hearing in the court, where these miscellaneous matters can be easily taken care of. And the other matters pertaining to serious trials, where the evidence has to be led, where a cross examination has to happen, where final arguments are to be conveyed to the bench, those matters can then be seriously taken on a physical basis, which means lesser footfall in the court, lesser chances of people contracting COVID, lesser chaos and commotion, and more streamlined approach of common sense and logic, which the law dictates and mandates us to be as lawyers and law students. The other thing that I think is the need of the hour is a good finance and a budget from the government towards the judiciary, which has been lacking over the years. Because if we do not have enough finances, we will not have enough courtrooms for the judges. We will not have enough budget to push the need of digitization, which is the need of the hour in our country. And without digitization, the last mile availability of justice, the last mile reach of justice, I don't think will ever be possible, at least in our lifetime, which I'm sorry to say will again paint a grim picture for the court goers, be it lawyers or be it their litigants. My friends, I think there are too many challenges and too many solutions, but I think all the stakeholders, be it the staff, be it the judges, be it the academicians, be it the teachers, be it the students, be it whosoever, I think has to come together and start this movement, because today is the time when the time is ripe for all of us to agitate a cogent plan for the future course of the country. So, for example, live streaming is one leg of the argument. I think the only court, to my knowledge, which has done live streaming in this pandemic is the Gujarat High Court. They have their dedicated YouTube channel in which the different courtrooms were given the liberty and different judges were given the freedom also to choose whether they want the court proceedings to be telecasted or broadcasted live on the YouTube channel. And to much of our pleasant surprise, I think the court has really taken the way of digitization in the right manner. YouTube channel, I think, has had a good number of subscribers. I see a lot of young lawyers and law students plugging onto YouTube channel even afterwards when the recording has taken place to learn from a day-to-day proceedings. The other way of getting benefited from this virtual court hearing is the whole idea of virtual internships. I have personally known law students who have not been physically allowed to enter the court premises even when the court are now trying to get back to their normal pace. So, for example, this shootout in Rohini Court in Delhi, I think last week, has obviously given a lot of scare to people. Security has become a prime concern. So that's why there is another setback for young legal interns to enter the court premises, because they do not have a lawyer card, they do not have an ID. If the lawyer is giving them permission, how can the police person trust that? So, lot many issues have cropped up. I think they could easily be solved with the mandate of virtual court hearings, whereby I think if at least what I keep telling my young interns is, if you have a court link either of a district court or of a high court, please click on it, keep your mic on mute, keep your camera off, and quietly observe the court proceedings, because that would put you at par on a physical hearing day where you would be going to a court, going to different courtrooms, looking at different judges and learning different things from them. So I think that is very important for all of us to keep learning, and learning has to be a continuous platform. There have been few practical difficulties that I've also personally seen in the court, where because of bad internet connectivity or a hybrid hearing, there have been a lot of chaos and confusion. So, for example, just last week, I had one of the matters in district court where the lawyer from the opposite side was appearing virtually and one of his junior was appearing physically in the court, and a very senior judge really got upset with their conduct and said to us that, look, you can't be appearing in two forums from the same office. You either appear physically or virtually, because the lawyer on the opposite side was making a submission on the virtual platform and his junior, with utmost chaos in his mind, was submitting to the judge in the physical court, and the judge was getting riled up. So these are the problems, these are a matter of common court courtesy, I think, which any young lawyer or a young team of lawyers in a law office need to understand. That at the end of the day, that judges are also human beings. They only, just like you and me, they also have 2 ears, one mouth, one mind to understand the intricacies of the facts of a case. And if we take them for granted, chances are your matter may not receive a favorable hearing and the client is going to suffer, or an adjournment is going to take place, thereby making already a difficult process more arduous for the litigant in case. I think as lawyers and as stakeholders in the society, it is completely a responsibility to ensure that whether a physical court hearing or a virtual court hearing has to be done with utmost care and concern. Courtesy, politeness, and formality are the touchstone of our profession. We have to be really formal to the judges, to our fellow members of the bar when we are making submissions. We have to be respectful, not to speak over the other person when they are making their submissions, especially when they're arguing. I think these are very basic courtesy. But I'm sure most of you must have also realized that during the course of this 1.5 years of digitization, some random incidents happened where I think one lawyer had appeared in his vest while arguing before the court. A lady lawyer in England had appeared in a bathroom. Some lawyers also appeared in their car just holding on to their phones. Some were standing in a bus stand. Some were caught eating food during the virtual court hearing. One of the senior lawyers was caught having a hookah while the court hearings were on. So all those things have really left a bad taste in the mind of the judiciary while giving this leeway or the whole experience of virtual court hearing, or virtual tourism, or judicial tourism as we may popularly call it, to the young lawyers and the members of the bar. But having said that, I think the positives of the virtual court hearings definitely outweigh the negatives. We have to now decide and strive forward to a more inclusive world where digitization can be more inclusive in our approach. We all research online, we have webinars online, we have debates online, we have moot courts online, we even order food online watch OTT online, we do everything online. Why can the justice not be dispensed online? I think this is a very big question. And on this note, I must pause my speech here and request Ms. Kishwar to kindly, tell the participants if they have any questions, any questions for me. I'm more than happy to answer. Any anecdotes, any wonderful story that you have to share in these 2 years of pandemic that you have suffered or from which you have gained, I'll be more than happy to be your audience and listen to it. And always please realize, as my teacher used to tell me, there are never stupid questions, there are only stupid answers. So if I'm giving any stupid answers, you can blame it on me and pin me down, but feel free to ask as many questions as you have in your mind. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a really insightful talk, and you also touched upon the various ethical issues that might erupt because of digitalization of court, and why or why not India is ready for a complete digitalization of the trials and proceedings. So I request the participants to drop in any questions that they might be having in the chat box, or just feel free to unmute yourself and we can address the questions. We do have a few comments in the chat box, and the first comment is from Advocate Irfan Khan, who says that that is the disadvantage of many personal reports, including psychological evaluations, medical reports, and other information are introduced in trials and other court hearings. There is a greater risk that this information can be hacked when you are in a video conference. Um,
Right. I think it's a fair comment, but I think we are taking things too far. For example, please understand that the platform which have been created for video conferences hearings are, I think in Supreme Court they're using an app called Video. At least in Delhi High Court they are using Cisco WebEx. I think some other high courts may be using Microsoft Teams or Google Meets. I'm not sure. Having said that, we are already living in an era, irrespective of court hearings, where privacy is usually debated and deliberated upon. We do not know how much of our data is already hacked or how much of our data is already compromised. So far as court hearings are concerned, I don't think the hacker has any interest in coming to a court hearing, because court hearings, by and large, for lawyers is perceived to be interesting, but for a commoner it's perceived to be a very arduous task and quite boring, because they may not realize or they may not understand what is going on. So far as the hacking of the documents that you're prescribing is concerned, there are two arguments to it. The first argument is, if your screen is being shared, it is being viewed by the judge or by the court and by you, and obviously by the members who have already logged in to a particular platform. Now, if they do not know your client, if they do not know anything about your case, it doesn't really matter, because even in a physical hearing, when you're making a submission for your clients, your facts are already being heard by the people who are awaiting their case in the background. So I think that argument goes out of the window. So far as hacking is concerned, unless your computer is hacked or your data is already compromised, then only there is something to worry about. Unless otherwise, I don't think you are breaching any attorney-client privilege from on your end voluntarily, which you're already trying to put before the court. So I don't think those. I think those are very moot points. And so far as these hearings are concerned, the people wiser than us have already thought about this, and that's why we had a virtual hearing in place. So we have to take things in a stride, think of a more robust and inclusive work culture in terms of these hearings. And so far as filings are concerned, despite screen sharing, the filings are still happening through registry. We still have to file digitally. The registry has to vet it, give us a number, and then that digital file goes before the judge. So for that to compromise again is a very very long shot, because most of the court registry and the court servers are already pretty much earmarked with their own cyber security.
Thank you so much, sir. We have another question from Mr. Ayush Kedia, who asks, sir, what are the possible solutions for recording evidence in criminal matter, since several times physical examination is needed?
Madam, I think there is a very simple solution. In fact, in the last 1.5 years, when I've had an opportunity to speak on this topic, I always say the solutions are very simple. The complexity of any problem lies with the people who are manning the guard of the judiciary. So, for example, we already have a nation where we have a system of DM and SDM, who are the executive magistrates, who already sit in their respective districts or Zilla or Mufassal, etc. So if we can have a kiosk present there, with a CCTV or with a laptop under the control of the staff of the SDM or the SDM themselves, then any person just to ensure that the evidence are being conducted independently without any iota of cheating, coercion, or prompting the witness. They can mark their attendance in the kiosk. Because they're in a SDM office, that attendance can be ensured by a government officer who is already sitting and supervising this, or the staff is supervising this. And a question and answer, like you are asking me questions on a webinar and I'm answering it without any delay, ensures that I'm trying to think on my feet, and I'm not being tutored or coached by a person on my side. So even I can read a person's physical attributes. I can see whether their eyes are moving here or there. Are they taking more time than normal to answer a question unless there is a very bad connectivity? All those things can be taken care of. But even as a pilot project, these things were never launched in a country. So for example, people in a criminal matter or even a civil matter or even in an arbitration, for the purposes of recording evidence, have to travel miles and miles, either in train or in plane or in other format, just to be physically present before the court and depose before the court. Now imagine if within India we can have these things deposed in a SDM or a DM office, or if you have a district court nearby, make a dedicated virtual courtroom there where people from other part of the city can also come sit there, and through a remote conferencing you can depose before the other court. Let's say you are sitting in Varanasi and you have to depose in Bombay. Why can't it be done through a digital conference? We are only putting so much of embargo on us and making excuses as to how things cannot be done when things can be done simply. So we have to find solutions, and judges and the court staff has to be very technologically literate. Look, at the end of the day, we are lawyers. We are not engineers or coders or hackers. The only thing that we have to do is to understand the facts of a case and narrate a tale before the court. That's the only role of a lawyer, and assimilate logic and common sense while you're making your arguments. If we can't even do that with the technology given to us today, then I think we have all failed in our duty, be it the judges, be it the lawyers, or be it the court people. So I think the time has come where we need to really find solution. If today we can talk on Zoom or on Google Meet or on Cisco WebEx, and these technology has already made our life so easy. I see so many of my friends who are not lawyers working effectively from home, doing their team meetings, exchanging emails, still getting the deliverables done. Why can't the judiciary adopt the same? Why does judiciary still need to have 2 months of holiday? Why can't they act like normal government department where every judge can go on a prescribed holiday of 21 days as and when they desire? So I think the overhauling of the system is required. We have too many hurdles in our mind, too many barricades in our mind not to work when we can actually work.
Thank you so much, sir, for that very insightful answer as to how to overcome the already existing problems and to find solutions to the newer ones that we might face. We have another comment from Ms. Yashomati Doshi, who says that I am suggesting a recording of the court proceedings, which we can get on a CD for a fee from the court. So how feasible do you think that would be?
Madam, I think it's a wonderful thing, but rather than waiting for a fee and everything, why can't every court have their own YouTube channel? Why can't live stream be the order of the day? And yes, if you require only a proceeding of your case, then I think apply online, and the court staff should be then able to give you only the hearing of your proceeding should you want to challenge any particular order which may have been passed on that particular day. The other thing is, I think a YouTube channel or a live streaming or a recording of this evidence would be great. For example, as I mentioned, even despite making my appearances and arguing before the court, sometimes the appearance is not recorded. Now, if somebody already sees me on screen, which is recorded, there will be absolutely no doubt that this person was, virtually or physically arguing a matter in a court of law. So, I think that's a wonderful suggestion by Ms. Doshi, what she has said. But for that to happen, the courts first have to realize that, the technical hurdle of adopting technology to do all these things first has to be overcome.
Yes, I agree very much. I think recording is a real advantage because some things are missed out sometimes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am. We have another question from Advocate Irfan Khan, and he says that is also the disadvantage. While most court sessions are open to the public, cases without a jury usually involve just the judge, the clients, and the lawyers. But when you are online using a service like Zoom, children, relatives, and anyone with a password can watch. This is especially important when it comes to sequestering witnesses. In physical court, the judge can order that the witnesses stay outside the courtroom until it's time to testify. it is harder to enforce the rules when you are conducting court virtually?
Look, Mr. Khan, there are two things to it. It doesn't just apply on court hearings, it applies on anything which is digital. For example, now that the students have been homebound for 2 years and the schools haven't opened properly, most of the young students are already very adept with the usage of technology. Now, even if you have kids at home, I don't know if you're a parent or if your relations have kids, you would have seen they're already very smart with the smartphones. They already know how to Google things. Even a 3 or 4 year old child can easily maneuver through iPad, and we cannot monitor anybody 24/7 unless there is a high security area or there is a 24/7 surveillance. Kids may go to any random website, which may be more dangerous than a court hearing. Court hearings are at least simpler when people are talking to each other. It's not voyeuristic. There is nothing adulterous or 18 plus content which is being showcased in a court. People are only talking with utmost politeness and sincerity when they are having a dialogue or deliberation. But when you go to Google, when you go to YouTube, when you go on the internet, when you go on a dark web, there are 100 things which are, I think, much more deadlier than a court hearing. So I think the flip side of the argument would be, how do we control the privacy of the people who are accessing this information? Because if a hacker actually hacks through a kid, a kid may not know what they are getting into. They may Google something, they may Google Cinderella, and the Cinderella may take them down to another Alice rabbit hole, to some other wonderland, where they may encounter a drug chain supply or something which may have adult content. That I think is more dangerous. I think that is something to be seen. So far as court hearings are concerned, I think even the court staff judge are very much careful as to who to admit in a court hearing, who not to admit. Matters relating to POCSO, rape matters, etc., where sensitive matters are involved, as it is, sometimes you can always put a request to the court to have this hearing either at the end of the board when all the matters are being heard, or to give a separate link. So those things can be taken care of by a simple request to the concerned court.
Thank you so much, sir. We have another question from Mr. Aman Sagar. He says, thank you, sir, for your brilliant insights about your virtual court experience. I followed the Supreme Court judgment regarding declaration of virtual court hearing as a fundamental right with respect to Uttarakhand High Court notification not allowing further virtual court options. And my question is, do you align with what Supreme Court stated as declaring virtual court as a fundamental right would be a death knell for physical hearing? Further, like you said, undeniably, virtual courts are good for a number of reasons. Best one being in the larger interest of advocates' time and clients' cost-cutting interest. So, do you think virtual courts have a future post-pandemic era in India? So, there are two questions. First, Mr. Sagar is asking about your opinion regarding the Supreme Court judgment regarding virtual courts being a fundamental right, and second is regarding the future of virtual courts post the pandemic era in India.
Right. I think it's a great question, Mr. Sagar. Let me answer it one by one. So far as the Supreme Court order is concerned, every time a change has to happen, it takes a longer time in the society, especially in our judiciary, to accept that change. Change is always opposed. Today we are witnessing a sea change in terms of technology, how technology has changed our life. So far as even when court hearings are concerned, nobody in their wildest dream would have imagined we would have a virtual court hearing in India had pandemic not happened, because courts were never open to the idea of digitization or having e-courts, etc. Yes, there were some developments here and there in few high courts across the country, including few courtrooms of the Delhi High Court, but by and large we still remained very, very distant from the technological reality of things. So far as when Supreme Court says it will be a death knell for liberty of people and this and that, in my respectful submission, I completely disagree. As I said, I have seen more people making excuses why things can't be done when things can be done. I am a lawyer, I appear virtually, I conduct webinars virtually. I have, till last week, I was operating my office virtually. Everybody was working from home because I put the health and concern of everybody, on top. Why were the solutions and suggestions that we are giving, either were not thought about or were not, deliberated, or even if they were deliberated today, we do not have the answer for the people of this country. Simple as that. If people of this country like you and me today, with smartphones in our hand, can order food from Zomato, can order taxis from Ola, can do furniture shopping, can do whatever you want with our fingertips, why can justice be not delivered on fingertips? That's the biggest question. And judges have to be held answerable for that. Doesn't matter if it's Supreme Court, doesn't matter if it's High Court, doesn't matter if it's District Court. At the end of the day, We are all stakeholders in the justice system, and our duty is for the citizens of this country, for them to get justice. And I think we'll be failing in our duty if we say this will be a death knell. Nothing is a death knell. For the past 2 years, when the VCs were being conducted, do you think there was a death knell for justice in the country? Do you think justice was not served? Justice was served. It's being repeatedly and 24/7 being monitored by the media on the legal news channels of the country. That Supreme Court is giving this judgment, High Courts are giving this judgment. This is what is happening. So where is the death knell? I mean, this look. It's smarter to make these sentences on judgments when you are sitting as a Supreme Court judge, because the people are going to hear you with much more aplomb and sincerity and seriousness. But my bigger question to the court and to every stakeholder of judiciary is, please give us solutions. You may dismiss a PIL, and that's fine. That's your judgment. That's your reasoning. But what is the solution? We all know the problem. The problem is we do not have a last mile delivery of justice. We have paucity of judges. What are the solutions? Please give people the solutions so that they have more and more faith in the judiciary. We are a service sector. If today we give good service to people, chances are more and more people are going to litigate, because they will have a robust faith in the justice system, and the time for which a matter should be dealt with from the lowest court to the highest court should also be minimized. A trial or any case in the country should not last for 20 years. So all these things, I think, have to be really taken care of. And to say it's death knell, it's Article 21. How often have we seen Supreme Court judgments, being contradictory to one another, then being later referred to a larger bench or to constitutional bench because some clarification was needed? And why is that? It is simply because, as the saying goes, to err is human. People who are sitting there are also human beings. They have first been law students, then they were lawyers, and they later became judges. This is the circle of life. That is how things function. And the way the things function, we have to look for solutions without offending people, without offending judges, without offending the citizens of this country. So I think rather than being too verbose and flowery with their language in our judgments, we need to find practical solutions which can help people. I think that is my humble opinion in this.
Thank you so much, sir. We have another question from Ms. Avanti Puredi, who asks, I feel online courts have one major drawback of unstable net connection and technical interruption. I believe it can lead to misconstruing arguments and can affect the case. Have you experienced or seen anything like this happen? And are judges considerate in this case of technical difficulties?
Both yes and no. Yes, I have seen judges to be considerate also, and no, because I have also seen judges losing their temper just because there is a broadband issue. Look, let me put a line defending them also here. If you are a judge and you are given a task to hear at least 50 matters virtually a day, physically, obviously, you are also hearing 50, 100 matters. But virtually, if I'm making a submission and that submission is not seamlessly going to the other side, of the bench, how will they dispense justice? And that becomes a problem, because broadband is not something that the judges personally installed. It is a company's duty, the company which is installing that broadband in a particular setup. So, those glitches has to be done away with for justice to be smooth. But if a glitch is happening on a day-to-day basis, then use a Wi-Fi in your house if that's working fine. If a court Wi-Fi is not working, either use 4G, 5G, something should be working, right? It's not like the country is coming to a standstill. So as I said, we have to find a solution. If today one room in my house may not be getting a 4G network, then I have to rely on my Wi-Fi. I have to rely on my other connectivity. As a lawyer, I cannot tell my client that I don't have a Wi-Fi connection. I cannot represent you in a court of law. Similarly, arguendo, a judge can also not say, no, I have a broadband connection, so I'm going to adjourn all the matters from for infinity. That is not how justice is to be dispensed with. You cannot be giving longer dates for, when we already have pendency for so many number of years. These 2 years have absolutely been chaotic and, have caused a major pause in the justice delivery system. And on top of it, then the broadband connectivity becomes the issue. Then you please take the matter, take a suo motu cognizance of these matters and put the stakeholders, be it the government or be it the, the service provider, as to why these services are not being done. I'm not saying courts are not doing their duty, but their duty right now what they're dispensing is perhaps 10-20% to their working capacity of 100%. That 100% duty has to really keep going on and going forward. I mean, Supreme Court sanction strength is what, 32 judges. Now I think since Justice Ramanna has been elevated, 9 judges at one go were promoted, which is a historical move. But imagine 30 or 31 odd judges for a population of 1 billion people. Now do the maths yourself. It's such a poor ratio, right? And every random matter today is going to Supreme Court hearing. So does the fault lie with Supreme Court? Does the fault lie with the High Courts who are not then properly listening to the matters? So our data has to be collated. A policy has to be made, and that has to be implemented for us to find the right reasons and the right solutions as to how we can lower the burden on every tier of the judiciary. So I think it's a really a complex issue where we need to have the like-minded stakeholders of the society come together and then find a solution which then can also be approved by the courts. Otherwise, the courts will think we are only attacking them and not giving them solutions. So we have to really come up with cogent solutions which can resonate with people of this country and also of the justice giver.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for that answer. We have another question from Doshi ma'am, and she says, I think having a virtual court hearing is an advantage for many, especially if a person has to travel a long distance. Also, we should be able to file documents online and resolve objections online instead of going all the way to court. And then also, we may not be able to meet the person in charge and go again physically. So what do you think about this suggestion, sir? So that we have to resolve the objections online, we should shift to documentation of the filing and documentations online. Do you think this would be feasible post-pandemic era as well? Or
I think it's a great solution, and I completely agree with what Ms. Doshi has to say. I think as the saying goes, we are not in the same boat; we are in the same storm. Literally, we are sailing the same storm of pandemic era. Having said that, I think once we go back to normal, I don't think people, at least in the court circuit, are going to adopt to digitization again. There are multiple problems. One, they have not been trained. I don't think they have been trained in these 2 years also. Unless we train them or we impart training to all the lawyers, judges, and staff together, and even the litigants to teach them basic virtual court courtesy, these things remain a distant dream. Yes, it's good for the country, it's good for the people, but the people who are executing them, are already sitting in courts. Till the time it does not appeal to their senses and their sensibilities, I don't think these things are going to become a reality. It will always become a moot point, arguing about these things in a webinar. So I think for a very practical setup, it's important that judges, if you know judges in your area, be it in a district court, be it in a high court, if you have friends in your circle who know judges, please have a meeting with them, sit with them on a cup of tea or coffee, start thinking about solutions, start exchanging ideas. I think we have to garner ideas from every quarter of the country to ensure that we find a very robust solution, to the problem that we've already faced in 75 years of our independence. But going forward, if we have to compete with the best of the best, we really need our justice system to work, on its feet.
thank you so much, sir. We have another concern from from Advocate Irfan Khan, and he says it is also a disadvantage, whatever may be more difficult for a judge to control a virtual courtroom than a physical courtroom. Judges can't see what's going on behind the scenes of the camera lens. What would be your take on this, regarding?
No, I agree with Mr. Khan. As I said, there have been instances where people have come in West, people have been smoking hookah, people have been eating. Obviously, you can't control, human beings everywhere. That's next to impossible. Unless we are God ourselves, I don't think that's an actuality we are looking at. These are practical problems, but we have to then find solutions. For example, today, if you're on Zoom and you are the administrator, you have a power to unmute me and stop my video, right? Similarly, the court master then has to do this. Somebody has to do this. The judge is busy hearing the matter and taking notes and applying their brain to a judicial conversation. Then it's the role of the court staff. That's why I said the training of the court staff is very important. If the court staff says, hands up, sorry, I can't understand internet, I don't know computer, I have never read this, then there is no problem to a solution, because as I said, there are more people in our country making excuses than giving solutions. So I'm absolutely with Mr. Khan on this issue.
Thank you so much, sir. I have a question from my side, and it's coming all the way from US. So she is my friend, Miss Olivia Thompson. She has not been able to log in, but she has sent the question, and she says that she is interested to hear more in-depth breakdown of how remote work has impacted the ethical standards and legitimacy of trial.
Look, I would not say ethical standards have been compromised because trials have not happened. Simple as that. If trials were to happen, then we would have gone on the question of ethics. So the thing is, and the biggest problem is, because trials have not happened, because the way that we have not been able to adopt to the technology properly, that's why the question of ethics doesn't arise. But so far as the question of ethics arises in normal day-to-day hearing, I think only more transparency has happened in this 1.5 years. people have gotten to understand the ease of judicial business by filing documents online, following it up with a court registry, and then arguing fearlessly before the judge, and the judge is able to see your name personally. So before, when you would normally go as a lawyer, they would say Mr. Counsel, Miss Counsel, Mr. Mrs. So and so. Now today, when they see your name, they would say yes, Miss Kishwar, yes, Mr. Bhatt. So that thing gives a personal touch. So I think you as a lawyer also feel validated when you're trying to make your argument. So I think things have definitely improved. I would actually like to know your friend's perspective from US. If there have been any ethical handicap in the trials there. In fact, let me illustrate an incident which I saw on YouTube a few months ago, and I had narrated that incident on my LinkedIn handle also, where I think a domestic violence case was being heard by one of the circuit judges in US, and the lady was quite terrified, and the prosecutor was very quick to think on her feet, and everybody was appearing virtually. She, on her phone, while the hearing was taking place, took the permission, I think, from the court, or maybe just because you're the prosecutor, told the precinct, the police precinct in America, to go and raid the house. And when they raided the house, they got to know that this lady was deposing for domestic violence on her. Her assaulter, or the boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, was also sitting in the next room, telling her to speak what she ought to speak, and he was arrested then and there. You can find this video on YouTube. It made a great impact on how quickly the lawyers have adopted to a virtual system, and how best we can come to the rescue of our clients also, and be just to the court. So again, human race is a very intelligent race. Doesn't matter whether we are appearing physically or virtually. The idea is, can we make justice quick for people? Again, I go back to square one. Can we make it quick? Can we make it last mile reach? Can we help people through this? For example, if you're driving on the road, at least in Delhi, the government of NCT Delhi has installed quite a number of CCTVs. Why? To ensure that vigilance is there, crime is reduced, and people do not violate the law. Similarly, to my mind, if we are to adopt virtual court hearings properly, chances are more justice is going to get done, then more people are going to, vis-a-vis, more people are going to be on the wrong end of the, injustice being suffered because of lack of virtual court hearings. So I think we have to look at both ethics, law, and justice from the same lens when we answer this question.
Thank you so much, sir. We have another question from Ms. Ishani Goel. She asks, sir, please suggest your opinion on the impact of digitalization on low-earning advocates. Are they able to buy smartphones, laptops, Wi-Fi connections, and other required things? In other way, the big law houses who used to grab the law business are flaunting in front of their clients. And the problem is also the lack of manpower with low-earning advocates to manage on so many virtual hearings, whereas you said that it took 45 minutes on one hearing, for instance.
Right. Let me give you a flip side of the argument and the question that you have posed. I am also a low earning advocate. Please don't consider me to be a high earning advocate. Let me put that thing very correctly. And let me give you my example. Has my office suffered? Absolutely. Has my client suffered? Absolutely. Everybody has suffered because it was a pandemic. So legal industry is not the only industry which was targeted specifically for loss of business. Everybody in an economy is interdependent on other businesses to flourish, for economy to rise collectively. That's how GDP and everything is also calculated. So for example, today, if 4 of my clients who are paying me initially lose their job because of pandemic, would they be in a position to pay me? The obvious answer is no. Be it even a law firm, and I have my friends who are partners in law firms, I have my friends across different sectors, and I keep talking to them on a very regular basis. Every business has suffered. The only business which may have perhaps seen an upside on the legal sector are the corporates, mergers and acquisitions, because pandemic required companies and smaller and bigger companies to either merge or to have a JV in order to survive and produce a better business model. So far as companies which are involved in the business of technology have obviously flourished. But by and large, every other person has suffered to some extent or the other. There have been layoffs in many offices, etc., etc., etc. Now, so far as an individual lawyer is concerned, that individual lawyer who is suffering on the business account caused by the pandemic is not suffering because he cannot buy a smartphone. Now, when I speak of a smartphone, I am not talking of Apple iPhone 13, which has just been launched for 1 lakh rupees. You can still buy a smartphone available for 5,000 rupees in Amazon on a EMI basis. Somebody in your family, if you are really not hand to mouth, can still buy a phone for an EMI. There are no cost EMIs available. And most of the lawyers I know already in the court, even in pre-pandemic, were already using smartphones. How many lawyers today have you seen using the typical old phone, that Nokia 1100? Very few. Most of the lawyers today already know how to use a smartphone, how to make a Skype or a WhatsApp video call, how to appear. I mean, we are living in a technology when we have embraced technology in our life. Money obviously is a concern. I'm not asking lawyers to buy the most costliest phone in the market, and do not download random apps in your phone. If you are a lawyer who thinks your livelihood depends on a court hearing, download Cisco WebEx, download Microsoft, and use your email from there. Even laptops are being given for a good rate. So no cost EMI, competitive market in terms of technology has really changed the game for a lot many people that I personally know. People, it's the difference between a doer and a non-doer. So a doer would do and be consistent about it, and a non-doer will always make excuses, similar to what our courts are doing. No, we can't do this. It will be a death knell. That is why we are not going to do this. But when they have an urgent matter to hear, they will take 4 days in hearing that urgent matter and even constitute a constitutional bench. So it's a matter of making excuses, my friends. And simple as that. So I'm not saying lawyers are not in financial difficulty. Yes, but who is not in a financial difficulty? Tell me that. Everybody is in a financial difficulty trying to make their end meet. People have their families to feed. People have salaries to pay. People have education fees to pay for their children. People have elderly parents in their house that they have to take care of. They have hospitals bill that they have to take care of. People have lost their near and dear ones in the pandemic, and that is not just India's truth. That is the truth of the world over when the COVID-19 hit the countries across the globe. So the idea is we have to look at the brighter side of things, and I'm not being optimistic for no reason, but being pessimistic is not going to take us anywhere. That's my simple approach in life.
Thank you so much, sir. And I totally align with you with your optimism also because of a personal reason. So my late maternal grandfather, he was also a practicing advocate in the district court. And the moment everything shifted to work from home, he called me. I was in the UK. He called me and wanted to know how to. So I had another laptop here. He wanted me to tell him how he can log into that and how he can go ahead. He also had his juniors to help him with, but unfortunately his health deteriorated and he couldn't continue with even one of the virtual hearings. But as you said, it's a difference between a doer and a non-doer. So even it's wonderful to see how advocates, old age advocates also who might never have used smartphone in their lives even once, are turning to their juniors and their grandparents and children, everyone and their children, to learn how to do the thing. So that exactly is the difference between a doer and a non-doer. So that was a very touching line that you said. I had a very nostalgic moment. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for sharing this wonderful piece of information. I think we draw inspiration from our seniors and from elders in the family and in our walk of life. And if they can do it, why can't we?
Exactly, and also in the district court in Gaya, we have judges who are not very well versed in typing. So to upload their orders, they simply write it down, and they have their other court officers to click a picture of that and upload it. So they are doing things their own way, but yeah, they are adapting. So that's very nice to see how everyone is adapting in their own way. We have another question. We have another concern from Advocate Irfan Khan, and he says that there is also a real risk of witness tampering. In a virtual courtroom setting, it can be hard to tell if the witness is being coached through text messages or some other dishonest method.
Irfan sir, if I may speak in Hindi to answer this question. वजह बहुत हो सकती हैं परेशान होने की, लेकिन उसके सॉल्यूशंस मैंने आपको पहले बताए. फॉर एग्जांपल जैसे कि अगर आप एसडीएम या डीएम ऑफिस में कियोस्क लगा के डिपोज कराते हैं, तो जाहिर सी बात है कि एसडीएम की इतनी कॉमन सेंस होनी चाहिए कि वो किसी को फ़ोन के साथ या ईयरप्लग्स के साथ नहीं जाने दे. अभी हमने देखा राजस्थान के एग्ज़ाम हुए तो ब्लूटूथ चप्पलें, जो आई थिंक एक चप्पल शायद 6-6 लाख रुपए की बिक रही थी, वो एक सिक्योरिटी कंसर्न हुआ. तो देखिए, जो ह्यूमन सिविलाइजेशन है, अगर वो कोर्ट में ऐसा दम भरती है चीट करने का, कोर्ट को डिफ्रॉड करने का, तो आपको पता है कि उसके ऊपर एक और एफआईआर कर सकती है. यू आर अ प्रैक्टिसिंग लॉयर, आई डोंट नीड टू टेल यू दैट. तो कोर्ट के सामने कोई भी इतने चौड़े में जाके फ्रॉड प्ले नहीं करेगा. लोग 2 बार सोचते हैं. आप आम जनता को तो मूर्ख बना सकते हैं, पर कोर्ट के सामने इतना आसानी से विटनेस टैंपर कर लेना और दूसरे वकील को इसकी ना पड़ताल हो, ना समझ करे, वो ऐसा ना कर पाए, तो ये भी अपने आप में बड़ी अजीब बात है. बिकॉज प्रोसिक्यूशन, अदर स्मार्ट डिफेंस लॉयर, इवन द जजेस देमसेल्व्स आर डूइंग दिस डे इन एंड डे आउट. तो इट्स नॉट द मैटर ऑफ फर्स्ट डे फॉर देम. उनको भी पता है कब ट्यूट हो रहा है, कब कोच हो रहा है. आपके हाव भाव वो पढ़ लेते हैं. तो इतनी आसान बातें नहीं हैं. आपके फेयर्स जो हैं वो ठीक हैं, वो अपनी जगह है, मैं उसमें मना ही नहीं कर रहा. लेकिन आप ये देखिए, वी आर डीलिंग विद अ वेरी स्मार्ट सिस्टम ऑफ जुडिशरी विच हैज़ इवॉल्व ओवर अ नंबर ऑफ ईयर्स. एंड advocacy is one of the oldest profession in the civilization. तो हमें इतना भी घबराने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. आई थिंक चीज़ें ठीक हैं, और अगर कोई ऐसी शैतानी करता है आपके क्लाइंट के अगेंस्ट या कुछ, तो आप भी उनकी शिकायत करें एंड ब्रिंग देम टू द कोर्ट्स नोटिस. आई एम श्योर द कोर्ट विल टेक इनफ केयर ऑफ दैट.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, I have a question from my end. So
Ji.
this is a concern regarding what challenges a female advocate could face on the virtual platform. So do you think there could be concerns regarding, or to what extent those concerns could be an aggravated concern on the virtual hearing? For example, could a certain action of a judge or maybe another advocate deemed to be an act which could be called an act of sexual harassment for another fellow lady advocate who is present in the virtual hearing, or any other person who is also attending the hearing, maybe the witness or someone else?
Madam, 2-3 things. Look, if you're already in a court hearing before a judge, and even otherwise, I don't think a fellow lawyer would dare to sexually harass or molest somebody virtually, even if they're perverse. Let me just put it that way. The other concern is if somebody can take your picture. People have already been doing that irrespective of lady or gents. Some of the court hearings which go virtually, some of the clips are also circulated in WhatsApp groups, where have courts, very categorically said, please do not record court proceedings unless mandated by the courts themselves. For example, if Gujarat High Court has said we can have a YouTube channel, it's already a recording, it's a live streaming. Other judges are not comfortable with this idea, but that does not stop people from recording something. So for example, I don't know, if we are talking, somebody may be clicking a picture of both of us with a smartphone. We can't stop everybody. So, the more we fear about things which can go wrong, the more it is going to impact our mental health. The positive side is nobody today is attacking you and me physically. I'm not saying virtually it's less dangerous. I'm not on that. But today, even if that person does something, one, I'll be officially warned because I've caught that person red-handed on a virtual platform, and I would be more aware that physically if that person comes to me, I will have my guard up. That is one. Number two, we can always formally complain to the bar or to the bench or to their office if they are somebody junior that, look, this was the conduct which was not appreciated, especially if it was a sexually colored remark, if it was a gender-based remark. Those things can be really taken care of. But before that, I think we must need to learn how to stand up for ourselves and, do a tit for tat, just answer them then and there. Rather than being dependent on somebody else, if we are completely fiercely independent ourselves as lawyers, look, we cannot protect the right of others if we do not know how to protect ourselves. It's as simple as that. So the first thing is, and in my chamber, I have lady lawyers and I have, gents lawyers. And I tell all of them equally, fight your fight. You have to really fight your fight. And there are enough people in the world to pull us down. There are enough people in the world to, put the carpet beneath our feet. But we have to really stand up for ourselves and not be bogged down by these simple things, especially on virtual platform. Don't be worried. Yes, there are cyber fraud, there are cyber crimes, but till the time we are not targeted, until the time we are prudent about our approach and not going to random websites where our computer is in a danger of getting hacked, I don't think we have anything to worry about.
Thank you so much, sir. And we have a last remark from Ms. Doshi, where she says that in such a case, it is the time that courts implement the rules of professional etiquette and practice seriously to infuse integrity. And she is responding this as a response to Advocate Irfan's question.
Ji.
And I don't think we have any further questions. And if we do, please feel free to put that in the chat box. But if we don't have any, I think we can have a closing remark from sir and bring the session to a close.
Thank you again so much, Ms. Kishwar and Ms. Madhura, for having me on board. And I think it was a very enriching and engaging session with my fellow colleagues at the bar and young members who are going to join the bar also. So I thank all of you for your patience. I know it's a Saturday night soon to be, and it's Saturday evening, so you're looking for better things. And I wish you a pleasant evening. If you wish to understand from people from our industry, for that I have started a channel called Sue You Soon. You can log on to that on YouTube. Subscribe to it, where I'm currently conducting a legal chat series with different people, retired judges, in-house lawyers, practitioners, etc. And it's a minimum 1 hour podcast. You can invest some time in that. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there, and I'll be happy to stay in touch with all of you. And thank you once again for having me on your platform.
Thank you so much, sir. And if we could please have the chat, if we could please have the name of the website on the chat box, because some of them are requested.
It's Sue You Soon. Yeah, so if you look up this website, you'll find it.
Okay, sure, sir. And I'll also send the website's name on our platform, and Madhura ma'am will also circulate that for all of you who are interested. And thanks a lot, sir, again. It was a really nice experience to have you and listen to your views regarding and also your practical experiences. I hope every one of us had very nice insight and got to learn a lot. Thanks a lot, sir, and we look forward to have you for more of our sessions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.